The thing I loved about Swaziland was its relative obscurity. You know, the fact that we can take something that just seems so far away and so distant, we can kind of just leave it there, but we can't just leave it there. It's small enough to be intimate, but it's big enough to impact the world. About 5 years ago, I began to have a sense that there was a project on the horizon. And I began to contemplate, because when that happens, the next thing I do is head to the studio and just spend time with my objects and the things that are there. And I seek guidance from God by spending a lot of quiet time. And so I did that for a long time, waited. I just waited. And while I was doing that, there was the development of the Swaziland partnership that was taking place that I was unaware of. And when my pastor began to talk about the mission of the Swaziland partnership, I realized that there was a definite connection. There was an intrinsic link between what I was supposed to do and this partnership. Did not yet have a clear vision, but I know from working in the studio that comes from getting my hands busy. So I decided that I needed to start to discover new methodology and new ways of making my work. I think the biggest impact on this project was my actual visit to Africa, but I will say that I'd been working in studio for a good strong year prior to that visit, simply on instinct and visions and things that I felt led to do. When we first drove up to Gigi's kitchen, and I saw those women cooking in those big cast iron pots, and then the children started to arrive, and there was all this bubbly noise and joy, and I looked at their feet, and it was as though their feet and their little hands had been in places I can't even imagine going. And it was so incredibly shocking to me. And I thought about my own kids. And if I can't reach to find my brothers and sisters that are supposedly forgotten, then how close am I to being forgotten? I mean, I think we're all here for a reason. And I love the fact that there's not a lot of hoopla around Swaziland, but there's a lot of need. And it seemed like the perfect connection to me because it matters. It matters a lot to me. How could I ever walk away from something like this and not be changed? And not do something? And I realized the extent of what this was going to be. And of course, having Bridget and Eric with me and seeing things through their eyes as well was incredibly dynamic. And I knew that early on that they were going to be a part of this. And when I asked them, it was just made so clear to me that they were the perfect partners to work on this. Although the photographs are specific of individuals, the sculpture and the photography together are considered, in my mind, universal. Those are statements. They will serve as iconographic illustrations, if you must, that represent the nature of what's happening to the women and the children in Swaziland right now. There needed to be something personal, something that you can take home with you. It's hard to take home a visual image, but stories live in your heart. The photography captures the image of real people. The stories share their thoughts and hearts and their circumstances on a level that we can only get from a story. And by placing them between the sculpture and the photography, we start to want to go back and look closer at some of the more abstract elements that aren't as obvious. So I'm hoping that what you wouldn't get from the sculpture from the first glance or from the photography. When you read the story, you'll find the connection to your own life on some level that you can understand. There are 12 pieces. There are 12 stations. It is meant to be visited. Each station is meant to be visited, and you gather something from the first station that you take to the next. So there is a puzzle there. There are some elements that are a little more difficult to grab or to reach. One of them, for instance, is the beaver. The beaver, during the medieval period, began to show up on the portals of Anglican churches as a symbol of Christ's healing love. So that's something that relates to that piece. There are pieces that talk about traditional and Western medicine, like the Black Mamba tile piece, where the two embrace each other and hopefully break the blinding bounds of tradition that can be dangerous. The glass piece that talks about the sharp edges of each of us. When the pieces are standing on edge like sharp tongues, we can cut each other, but as we submit to one another, the pieces will lay down and create a smooth surface, and we can see the needs of the world underneath. Pieces about metamorphosis and change and growth and deliverance. Pieces that relate to bondage, like a brick house or a brick binding agent that would tie us down, but in the very midst of that, the bluebird of happiness can light on our heads, as I saw happen over and over and over again with the women I interviewed in Swaziland. So there are all of these kinds of things that are hidden and woven throughout these pieces. The pegs are all there. If you'll let yourself enter into the piece and take with you some of the elements, it may be a day, it may be a week, it may be a year from now, but you'll have a moment where you'll recognize it, and that will be an aha moment for you. And part of the purpose of the exhibit is for you to discover the connection that you have, not only with the sculpture, but how that might connect you with every other person on this earth that we share. My greatest hope is that while you are looking at the art, and while you are looking at the photography, and while you are looking and reading the stories and learning about these people, that you will find something of yourself. And if you can do that, if you can leave this exhibit feeling like you have seen maybe part of yourself in some of this, I believe you will have the tools you need to make a difference.